What NSFW fact did you learn at an embarrassingly late age? My brother went the first 22 years of his life thinking that every woman in the entire world got their period during the last week of the month. That tampons stay inside the woman. I thought they went in the bathroom, popped one in and it soaked up all the blood. Then they removed it and were good for a few hours. What a wet dream is. I remember in school being taught, but not knowing what it was. I even remember answering the question on a 6 at TED. Wet dreams are also referred to as nocturnal emissions. Blah blah blah. But I had no idea what they were talking about. I always thought a wet dream meant you peed yourself. Not me, but an old roommate of mine. He comes in and asks me if my husband and I were gonna have sex that night. I told him probably not because my husband got home late. He then asks me if his girlfriend can have one of my birth control pills because they didn't have any condoms. I told him no because I have to take it. He asks me why because I said my husband and I weren't gonna do anything. I told him you have to take it at the same time every day for it to work. He looked at me like an idiot, and that was the day I had to explain birth control to my 23-year-old roommate. I'm an RN and I told a patient I needed her to put a tampon in before we collected her urine sample because she had vaginal bleeding. She looked at me like I was an absolute idiot and said, "You can't do that. If you put the tampon in, how can the pee get out?" Mind you, this was a 25-year-old woman who also had 2 daughters. It took about 10 minutes of explaining for her to understand that you don't pee out of your vag. I still don't think she believed me. My male housemate in college, who was 21 at the time and not a virgin, totally didn't believe me when conversation led to my telling him that girls don't pee out of the same hole the pen 15 goes in. He had to go down to his room and Google it. And then we never spoke of it again. Women wipe themselves with TP after going pee. Was in my mid-20s when I found that out. I had to explain sex ed to my college roommate who was having sex with the 40-year-old pizza delivery guy. Unprotected. I had to explain pregnancy, birth control, the process, everything. She thought I was crazy. Not me. But I had a friend who basically explained that he didn't know that if you had a vag you still had a urethra. I think he was in high school before he learned otherwise. He just thought that the labia essentially acted as floodgates, and when you needed to pee they would open like a trapdoor and your urine would just fall out. I still laugh about this. There's more than one size of condom. I had to break it to my 27-year-old friend that she doesn't pee from her clit. That being circumcised didn't mean the head of your big dick gets chopped off. I was too old when I found that out. At 18 years old, I had no ducking clue that gonads just moved on their own. I sat and stared at his gonads for a good 10 minutes. Just in absolute awe. I felt like I was tripping on acid. The skin moved up and down, swirled around, turned to the left. I have never had my mind more blown than that moment of watching gonads move around for the first time. Edit goddamnit guys. My highest comment is about gonads. I thought this was a known fact that the skin can just move right before your eyes. Fascinating. Is it not? Ladies have 3 holes in their bottom half. Apparently. Netflix and chill has a slang meaning I didn't know it had. While getting my hair cut the other day by a 20-something hairstylist, the conversation turned to what we were doing that weekend. Not having a lot going on that evening, I told her I wasn't doing much. She said the same. She said she was just going to sit at home that evening and relax. So I said, "Oh, Netflix and chill." The look on her face told me immediately I had put my foot in my mouth. I simply smiled at her innocently. After a few awkward moments she said, "You don't know what that means, do you?" I confessed that I didn't. Like trying to explain something to her clueless grandfather, she made me aware of the subtext meaning. So, that was an uncomfortable haircut. For whatever reason, I grew up thinking that men were supposed to have 3 testicles. I was a 13-year-old boy before learning the truth. I thought I was deformed. Or maybe my third ball just hadn't developed yet somehow. I'm not really sure what I was thinking. I just remember the absolute embarrassment I felt when one of my friends found out about this misunderstanding. That there's movement involved in PIV 6 rather than just insertion and laying there. I had a general idea about sex from a very young age but didn't officially understand the mechanics of intercourse until I was a young teen after I asked, embarrassingly loud, in class what a boner was. Cum is supposed to leak out of a woman's vag after sex, if she's walking around. I never really thought of it until my last girlfriend mentioned it, suggesting it was weird. Then I read about it on here, someone mentioning that it's normal. We broke up afterwards so she still does know. When I was in high school, my parents, my best friend and I were going somewhere, parents in the front seat, me and my buddy in the back. While we were driving, my folks were listening to some oldies on the radio. There was an interview with the lead singer of and the Mysterians. In the interview, he said the song 96 Tears was originally called 69 Tears but they changed the name because they knew the song wouldn't get any airplay with the original title. Me, I don't understand why it wouldn't get played on the radio. 96. 69. They are just numbers. Awkward pause. My best friend leaned into the front seat and said Emma and Mrs. Groovy Brent. I've got this one. Later that day he explained what I had just asked my parents. I very recently discovered that the clitoris is outside of the vag. My first girlfriend never learned where it was so I didn't think anything of it. My current girlfriend when we started having sex she said don't forget the clit and I went, what? When I was a sophomore in high school I was awkward and regularly picked on. I thought I was super cool wearing LA Looks hair gel to style my hair with a duck butt. The stuff often dried and peeled and left white chunks in the hair if you touched it too much. So at the lunch table this girl goes it looks like you have jizz in your hair and I didn't know what that word was so I just said yeah I do and then nobody talked to me the rest of the day. Not to touch the head of a guy's big dick right after he's orgasmed. Sorry. Dude. Edit, I get it. Some people are into that. But this particular fellow wasn't. I like being bitten smacked having my hair pulled but some women will flip their shit on you if you just do it out of nowhere. I thought being a bottom was when the guy was on the bottom of the girl. Only realized when someone jokingly asked if I was a power bottom. And I said oh yeah. They never let that one go. You can suck and lick anything as long as you wash it off first. I used to be grossed out by oral sex because you either literally piss with those organs or come close to it. Not me but I had a rather frustrating conversation with someone in high school on the bus about foreskins. He couldn't fathom how someone could be uncircumcised because, and I quote, how could you even pee then? The dude literally thought the foreskin covered the entire pen 15 at birth and you had to be circumcised so you could pee. I was like 22, now 26, when my boyfriend said something about finding my pee hole. I thought I had been peeing out of my vag. I used to think that every time I had to pee on my period I had to remove my tampon. Edit, I guess I probably knew there were two separate holes. But your lie swear it felt and still feels the same to me. A girl I know at school, high school, thought that penises had bones in them. I learned in elementary school that babies were made by a male sperm coming out of the testicles, making its way to a female's egg and fertilizing it. What they failed to mention was how the sperm got there. I thought that the sperm fizzed and foamed through the skin of the gonads. And you rubbed the fizz foam concoction up against the vag while the sperm figured out the rest. I didn't realize the truth until the end of 6th grade when I witnessed my first porn flick with my best friends. It wasn't until earlier this year that I admitted this was my understanding to my GF. My school tried to keep sex ed as PG as possible, never mentioning or showing diagrams of penetrative sexual intercourse. They just use the term sex and intercourse without any sort of context to paint an accurate picture for us. My GF thinks it's absolutely hilarious. I thought it was fairly embarrassing. Knowledge is power. My girlfriend in high school once rubbed my big dig over my pants in my truck before a movie. When we talked about how that was later in the evening, she said that was my first handy. She honestly thought that was a handy. The difference between vulva, labia and clitoris. I'm uncircumcised and it took me way too long to understand that my pen 15 was different than most guys. Since here in the US, circumcision is more popular. That girls can masturbate too. I learned this at almost 14. I'm female. Edit, learned how to correctly spell masturbate. My buddy thought the pen 15 went into the clitoris at the age of 19. Thanks to some subpar sex ed. My first boyfriend thought HIV spontaneously generates when two guys have sex. We went to get tested for HIV after we ducked for the first time, even though we were both virgins before. How many tampons a lady goes through during her period? I was 26 when I found out. Met a girl in college who didn't know guys' gonads know with temperature. That pee is stored in the gonads. That penetration requires your height and position to actually match up with your partners, and that if you're gonna do it doggy style, you're really gonna need flexible legs if you wanna stay comfortable. Edit, I mean height as in your relative positions, not how tall either of you are. Yeesh. I guess it wasn't a necessarily late age, but I was telling a whole group of horrified friends in high school about how I was eating out my cousin for doing something, only to later be told the difference between eating out and chewing out. You can't get pregnant if you dry hump with clothes on. I was told at school that you could. I didn't know this until I was 19. Edit, good to know. My highest upvoted comment was about thinking you could get pregnant through dry humping.